Think back to when you started your company and the first hire that didn't work out for you. How much did that actually cost you? I'm not just talking about whatever it cost you to recruit them, but think about the 6 months of wondering, the 60-day performance plan, the energy drain on your team. My guest today is Daniel McCaulley. He's a licensed professional engineer who walked away from a cushy corporate job to start Ultimus Engineering. And in this conversation, he gets really honest about what went wrong with his first hire. It was his first hire that didn't go well. And why remote work is a privilege and not a right, and in his opinion, doesn't work for most people in the working population. And how he built a business where 70% of his clients come back for more. We also get into something I think every construction company owner needs to hear, and that is the lifeblood of your business is sales, not your technical ability, sales. Daniel learned that the hard way, and he's going to tell you exactly when that hit him. Let's dive right into the interview. This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. Daniel, welcome to Construction Genius.
Happy to be here, Eric. Appreciate it.
Yeah, great to have you on. You played football in high school and in college as well. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah. And you talk about bringing that kind of competitive intensity into business. Football is obviously, it's one of those awesome sports. When you win, it's great. But when you lose, it sucks. In terms of how to handle losses, what's the biggest loss you've taken in your business life? And how did what you've learned playing football help you to navigate that difficulty?
A really good question. And that's, I talk about that a lot, about the reason why I started this company was essentially out of the competitive need and desire to do something challenging, do something difficult, something that other people either can't or won't do. And that's really the driving force behind everything I do, personal, professional, or otherwise. Starting a company, you don't know what you don't know. My background is in engineering. And while I also have an MBA, and I think we'll talk about that here in a little bit, I didn't know how to start a company, right? I'm not an accountant. I'm not an HR expert. So a lot of the challenges early on came from areas where I don't have a lot of personal experience. One of the challenges really early on was when we started trying to hire full-time employees. One of the first employees I hired was actually from out of state, was willing to relocate here, but work largely in a remote role. Seeing as a couple of years ago, a lot of us were still in a very much work from home environment, work remote, as we were trying to figure out COVID, if you will. And one of the things that we experienced early on was just kind of a lack of either understanding, appreciation, communication when it came to roles and expectations for one, this candidate moving from out of state, coming into a very small firm was, like I mentioned, our first full-time hire, and three, being largely a remote employee. And the whole remote work experience, I've come to decide, is not really something that should be considered a right within employment. It's very much a privilege. It's very much a benefit. We all had to do it for a short amount of time, but now it's something that should be considered, again, a benefit or a privilege. And this employee either was misinformed, misunderstood, or just general miscommunication inside the business. And it didn't work out. It was lots of improvement plans and trying to figure out how do we get this employee to get the work done they needed to get done. And they claimed they were doing it, and then they obviously weren't. And it was kind of came to a head. And essentially we came together, and it was, do we talk about termination or do we talk about resignment? And it kind of worked itself out, just suffice to say. But that hurt. I had never in my career of leadership or engineering had to even remotely consider employee termination. The only other time prior to that I've ever had an employee resign was many years ago. I had an employee working for me. He's fresh out of college. We were an oil and gas company. And he came to me about 6 weeks later and said, "Hey, I'm sorry to do this, but I just got my absolute dream job working for Ford designing race cars. Okay, cool. I know that's not on me. No problems, man. Go live your best life. So it struck me because I'm put a very significant focus on the team, the greater team. I don't want to use the word family flippantly, but the people that work for me and with me over the years, it takes everyone. It does take a team. It's a football team or an engineering team. I can't do it by myself. That's why I had to hire other people, and no leader, no business owner can do it, construction or other industry. And so that was a big learning experience, is really just focusing on not only the communication with our clients, which we put a very significant effort towards, but communication with our internal employees, with our vendors, with anybody that we touch. Because if the cards aren't on the table, if there's a misunderstanding, that's the first place where projects and relationships go sideways, is misunderstanding and misinformation.
So let me ask you a question then. As you look back to that first hire, what responsibility do you bear for that failure of the hire in terms of the clarity of your communication about the role and the responsibility?
I feel that we were pretty clear and that this was going to be a remote role and that engineer would be required to work independently. I think what maybe wasn't clear enough, which we have made much more clear now with our recent hires, which have all been great, they've stuck around, was essentially the criticality of how a small business operates different than a large company. So this employee was coming from a larger organization, and I assumed that whether or not you're working for a big company or a small company, or it's a big project or it's a small project, a deadline is a deadline. But what I've come to appreciate more is that if you are working on let's just even say a multi-year project, and you cut out early on a Friday afternoon and it's a deadline that pushes to the following Monday, probably no one's going to really notice. But the difference is when you're working with a smaller organization, the visibility between staff engineer and executive leadership has become essentially zero. And the visibility between that engineer and the client and the billable hours on a project, if you have 2,000 billable hours, 2 hours is meaningless. If you have 20 billable hours, 2 extra hours is 10% of the project.
Yeah.
And articulating that to someone who's coming from a larger company, they may not immediately understand or appreciate that. It's 2 hours. What difference does it make? Well, look, you're designing a 4-foot retaining wall. And if you take an extra 2 hours on something that should only take you 2 hours in the first place, then that can cause some significant financial implications, timeline implications, client relationship stresses of, well, you said this is only going to take 2 weeks. Well, yeah, 2 weeks was last Friday. Right. Again, it's a retaining wall. So just framing that conversation with engineers, we love engineers coming from larger firms. They're really great on policies and procedures and templates and getting things done in a very organized way, which is great for engineering. But sometimes that immediate understanding is not as obvious as it is someone working inside the business. And that's one thing that we've really impressed moving forward.
What's the size of your company now?
We have 6 full-time employees right now, and I have open recs for 3 more. So we're growing as fast as we can.
Okay. How long did it take you from the date of hire to the point where you realized that this person was no longer a fit for your organization? What was that time frame?
About 6 months.
6 months. From realizing that this person wasn't a fit to ending the relationship with them from a business perspective, how long did that take?
I don't remember exactly. It was 60, 90 days, maybe, somewhere in there.
How did you feel about that in terms of that time frame? Do you think that was an appropriate time frame? Do you wish it was shorter? Was it too long? What did you think?
I think it was fair, right? In that first 6 months, there were conversations of, hey, let's make sure we're doing this. Let's make sure we're doing that. And so it wasn't that person was not informed or we didn't have guidance type mentorship conversations. And then all of a sudden it was day one, hey, here's an immediate performance improvement plan. Right. So it kind of took that 6 months before, hey, we've had these conversations. Here's your improvement plan. You essentially have 2 months to kind of figure this out. Right. And then we had another one at maybe, we had a 15-day check-in and a 30-day check-in. I was like, look, these things are still deficient. We really need to get this figured out. And one of the things that we did was, again, remote work environment wasn't working.
Right.
So we're now no longer a remote employee. You're going to come in, you're going to sit next to me, and we're going to work together so I can make sure you're actually doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Why do you think the remote environment in your business doesn't work?
It's not that it doesn't work based on our environment. It's the person. It's not the job. It's not the industry. It's the individual and their own intrinsic motivation to do the right thing and to get things done.
In your opinion, what is the proportion of people in the general population that are suitable for work at home environment?
That's a really good question. I think the number is probably less than 50%. I think it's probably much smaller than that. And I think that where it gets difficult is within larger organizations, you lose visibility over what people are actually doing.
Right.
You lose visibility over individual projects of billable hours. You can always hide in a larger organization where you're just a number, where you're one of 10 on a project or one of 10 on a team. It's easy to hide. It's easy to cut out early on a Friday and just ignore work for a couple hours and, oh, well, I'll get to that Monday. It's not a big deal. Yep. So I think it just becomes more visible with smaller organizations. I do think this goes back to your previous question of our specific industry.
Yes.
When we are looking to hire professional engineers, that is a higher level of expectation than maybe your general public of other positions that a typical company might hire for.
Right.
So I think with that, there are the higher levels of expectations. It's a higher level of professionalism, just like it would be for a CPA or a lawyer or a doctor. It's a professional designation. Yes. It generally comes with significantly more education, but at the very least, you have to sit down and prove that you can pass an 8-hour exam with a sub 50% pass rate. So with that anticipated, maybe even call it just higher level of intelligence, you would expect that an employee would be able to perform in maybe less structured environments. But emotional intelligence doesn't always translate into, intelligence doesn't always translate into emotional intelligence or social awareness.
Yep.
So that's a big piece of it. I think especially engineers do struggle in that regard, and that we as engineers are typically not classified as the most relational or the most communicative or the highest level of EQ. And finding people with those higher levels of those specific skill sets, you have to have some of that to be a good and effective true work from home employee. There's always distractions. Yep. There's the water cooler talk. There's walking to the break room. You're going to have that in an in-office environment. But whenever you go back to your desk, the dishwasher's not running, the dog's not barking, the snack cabinet's not screaming your name. So there are different distractions. And it's just a lot of that is in the upfront vetting process. And we ask questions like, what sort of work from home experience do you have? What does your daily routine look like? Somebody without a daily routine does not function well working from home. You have to have a separate space. You can't be kicking your feet up on the couch, working from your laptop. That's not an effective way to truly work from home.
Yeah. Why did you start your own business?
There's a massive need for engineers to communicate. But whenever you say everything is engineered, it doesn't matter if it's buildings or macaroons. You could argue that everything is engineered. I started doing some research. Third-party engineering or consulting engineering is a $250 billion a year industry. And I figured 1% of 1% of that would be a very achievable goal.
Sure.
And I realized through my professional career, back in high school and college, coming to the realization that engineers who communicate and engineers who are relational are a rare breed. And people appreciate being able to have a technical resource that also can communicate and empathize and be relational with people. So it was kind of this combination of personal experiences on working with teams, for teams, managing teams, hiring third-party engineering firms, being part of a hired third-party engineering firm, just essentially realizing that it doesn't matter what end of that you're on. Engineers are typically not your best communicators. They can be rigid. They can just not articulate well in general. They're very wonderful at their technical craft. But I just realized that there was a seemingly large gap in the marketplace for having a service-based, if you want to call it that, a service offering, personal concierge style, if you will, a white glove service, first class service offering in a technical industry. Now, there's certainly others that do it. It's not complete, strange, original, creative thought, but I thought that would be a really good way to go about it.
What were your fears or concerns as you were thinking about starting a business, and how did you overcome those prior to starting the business?
The biggest thing was, how do I support my family?
Right.
At the time, my wife was working, and we knew that she could, obviously there would be an income in there. But whenever you go, how do I take this? At the time was a really cushy corporate job. I was working for a phenomenal company. But whenever you go, had a roadmap to the top, and there was really no good reason for me to leave, other than I felt like I was being called to do something more.
Right.
I felt like there was a better way to support my family. And the biggest fear was, how do I not burden my family with this dream that I have?
Right.
And one of the things I did to help with that was I didn't just walk into my boss's office one day and say, see you later, and then go try to start an LLC. The first 2 years of running this company, I did it as a moonlighting opportunity. And management at the time was informed, and it was non-competing, and everything was on the up and up, obviously.
Right.
But I was a little bit frugal. I saved up some money. The previous company I was at was very generous and helpful with bonuses. And I was able to essentially provide a 1-year runway for myself financially,
right. Yep.
where at least the financial burden was minimized.
Yep.
But the other piece of it was too, is it's one thing if you go buy a franchise, right? If you're going to go open a Chick-fil-A,
sure.
You open that store day one, you have clients, you have business. Yeah. With a engineering firm, you have to go find that work. So part of getting that financial capital to give myself essentially a year's worth of living expenses, part of that was building enough of a client base where within that year, I wasn't starting from scratch in year one,
right?
Because it took that 2 years. And then it took from when I left to when I started going full time, it took every bit of 8 months before the company was really producing enough where I wasn't just pulling out of my resources, that the company was essentially paying for itself, paying for my family's living expenses. And that took, I'd say, about 8 months out of that 12-month runway that I had. So that was kind of the transition and how I was blessed enough to be able to make that happen.
Sometimes when people start a business, they spend too much time playing house, setting up the various structures and all of the things that people think that we need to run a business. And many of those things obviously are necessary. How did you balance the need to have a rational structure for your business with the need to sell work and get out there and get clients?
Well, there are some things that you do have to set up, especially right. in professional industries. If I was freelancing artistic services, there's less rules and regulations. But as right. a licensed engineering firm, there are insurance requirements that we have to have. There's professional designations and registrations. We have to be licensed not only with the yep. state, but also the state engineering board. So there were a number of guidelines that we had to have set up from day one. Yep. One of the things we didn't necessarily have to have from day one, I didn't have to have a payroll company or yep. a dedicated marketing firm, but I did want to do it what I consider the right way. So it's actually a good friend of mine who's a marketing expert. He helped create the logo and he helped create the color scheme and he developed a website. So we did have a lot of those things that some people may consider not entirely necessary or ancillary. We did have a lot of that from day one.
Yes.
But a lot of that is my own personal, I guess, just my own personality on, I like things to be buttoned up. As an engineer, I do have a little bit of quirks I'd like things nice and neat and organized and in a row. And I didn't want to have distractions when we were really up and running. And so I think having that kind of 2-year buffer to work out a business plan and just a high level strategy, more so that I could have goals for myself to hit.
Yep.
But again, doing that through that transition of I still have a full-time job, I still have the support. And then once I did go full-time in the business, all stuff was out of the way. So it wasn't a distraction. And that was, I think I didn't necessarily purposefully do it that way. It just kind of worked out through that transition. But anybody who's in a full-time job trying to start their own business, I would recommend, look, while you have the financial security of a full-time position, don't work during work hours. Obviously, do that on your own free time, but getting all those things out of the way so you're not surprised by, oh, well, I've got a client that's requesting, what is this? Certificate of insurance? I don't even know what that is.
Yeah, right.
If you need it, get all that buttoned up early.
Yeah. As you're running your company, you believe in spending more engineering time up front so that the construction process itself is as smooth as possible. But sometimes you get these clients that are screaming for you to speed up to get to permitting. Walk me through a specific moment where you had to kind of fight with a client on that philosophy and how that played out.
Sure. It happens all the time. More so, I would say, on the smaller projects than the larger ones. If this is a $10 million construction project, people understand that you want to cross your T's and dot your I's. But on the 1,200 square foot coffee shop or 2,000 square foot sports bar, where it might be a $300,000 light renovation, it's all about, hey, let's just get to permitting. My contractor will quote unquote figure it out. You can only lead a horse to water, and we can educate. And actually, our last newsletter, this last one, but the one before, we had a whole post about what is design build and construction and the value behind that.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that leads to this question is, how do we do more upfront? So once we get to construction, everything's faster, 140% faster. So if you could spend 20% more upfront to save 140% on the back end, people appreciate that. Now, again, you can tell someone that and they may or may not believe you.
Right.
In a recent project, we had that conversation. I stressed the importance of code compliance, calling the city, asking for verification on if a specific type of product they were trying to implement was going to work. And there, I'll give you the details. It was a sports bar, and the client is the owner, but working with an architect and a general contractor. They told me that they wanted to use 2 smaller indoor grease traps instead of the 1 larger outdoor grease trap that we had recommended.
Right.
And my first comment, especially in sports bars, is you really don't want to use an indoor grease trap because heaven forbid you have to open that thing. It's not going to smell great, right?
Yeah.
And you've got all kinds of nasty stuff being poured down a bar drain.
Yep.
But for construction reasons, for availability of product, for ease of construction, just getting to permitting, all of the reasons why they said, we'll move forward with this. And my comment was, well, at the very last, you want to check with the city and make sure that this is allowed for what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
The comment was, we checked, it's fine. I said, can I please see that in writing? Their comment was, we checked, it's fine. Okay. Again, I'm not going to be so rigid that I say, well, I'm the engineer, whatever I say goes. I'm not going to do that. That's a big part of the communication. We want to help people as much as we can. So we proceeded with that on the drawings. From our perspective, there was nothing in our visibility over the code. There was no engineering reason why it would be wrong.
Right.
Just we didn't feel that was necessarily in the owner's best interest, but the general contractor and the architect were able to convince the owner that this was the way that needed to go.
So let me ask you a question about that, because a lot of the times, whether we're contractors, engineers, architects, whatever the case is, we get into trouble when we do the wrong work with the wrong clients in the wrong locations. So as you are building relationships with people and making a decision, go, no go, on whether or not you're going to get into a project with someone, what are the red flags that tell you, you know what, even though I may want this work, maybe it's even the right type of work, because of the client and the way that they handle themselves, I'm just going to walk away?
That does happen. And recently we have declined work, even with repeat clients, because that client has proven themselves over a couple of projects to not listen to recommendations, to not really essentially, I don't want to say go with our guidance, because again, it's all about conversation and all about, there's lots of gray area in construction.
Right.
But time and time again, when we make recommendations and the client puts their foot down and decides to go a different route, and then that route ends up being wrong. And then really the hard part is, I don't want to sound like I'm pouting over this, but when we get blamed for it at the end, then that's like, look, we made these recommendations. Here's the emails, here's the proof.
Yep.
Then those are not clients that we want to continue to work with, because it causes a big strain on us operationally.
Yes.
Yeah, we still may get paid, but at the end of the day, if our engineers are frustrated, then it just inherently, to us being humans, we may not put as much effort into the next one. We may not do the extra due diligence that we pride ourselves in, making the extra recommendations. Hey, client, I know you said you wanted this, but just hear me out, explore these options. Well, if we know that client, or we perceive that client's not going to listen to us and do whatever they want anyway, it's hard for us to want to put in the extra effort to do the extra things that we pride ourselves on to make that project more successful. And if we're not going to do that, then I don't want to be part of that project if we're not going to be able to really put forth our best effort. So it does happen. I hate that. Obviously, I hate turning down business. I hate firing clients. But to keep our processes streamlined, to keep our mission statement true, and to keep what we stand for really moving forward, we can't work with everybody.
I think what that does, and something that we don't think about necessarily, is being willing to walk away often is more important than walking away itself, because what that does is it gives you a tremendous amount of grounding in the moment and even authority that can have an impact on the people that we work with to take our recommendations more seriously and to want to think about doing the work in a way that's more productive and more efficient ultimately.
That's really good. And I think it's a famous song lyric, you got to know when to fold them, right?
Yeah, right.
And and we've done that in situations, and 6 months later, maybe longer, those clients come back.
Yeah.
And they say, hey, look, we tried some other engineering consultants.
Yep.
Essentially, they kind of a foot in the mouth moment. And they're like, look, can we try it again? Can you help us out? Or what's even more, I say, kind of disheartening for those clients is they go somewhere else, or, and a little bit this happens kind of alternatively, but it's the same situation, is the client goes to another engineering firm and it doesn't go well. And then we're brought in to try to fix it. And that's a project that we bid. And I mean, this can happen in another way. So we bid a project and somebody tells us, well, your price is too high. And we negotiate, well, I've got this other price that's so much less that I have to go somewhere else. Hey, great. I wish you the best.
Yeah.
And then they come back and, well, this didn't work out. Can you do it? Sure, I can do it. My price is still my price. Or maybe somebody else goes somewhere else first and we don't even hear about a project and it goes south. And hey, could you save us? They didn't come to us initially, but we got to fix projects. Or it's they come to us, we were done work before, we go our separate ways, and then they come back later and want to try it out again. So all of those things happen, and it's flexible. And I understand at the end of the day too, it is just business.
Yeah.
People have to do what's right for their businesses based on their perception of a specific instance or situation. We do the same, and things change. If situations change, we're happy to reassess those relationships.
All right, quick break to talk about my book, Construction Genius. This is what I want you to do. Go to Amazon, search for the book, read all of the 5-star reviews, because there's a ton of them. Over 50 to be precise. And the reason I want you to read them is because real people wrote those reviews who've actually read the book. And it'll give you an idea of why you should go and buy a copy right now on Amazon. And here's the deal. If you purchase 10 or more copies for your company, and then send me an email, eric@constructiongenius.com, I'll come in via Zoom and do a 1-hour Q&A and a bonus training session with your team at no charge. I normally charge $4,500 for an hour of my time. And again, for you, I'll do it at no charge if you buy 10 or more copies of my book. And the reason you should buy it is all in the title. It's effective, hands-on, practical, simple, no BS, leadership, strategy, sales, and marketing advice for construction companies. So if you're in the construction industry, this book is for you. So you can get it on Amazon. You can also get it on Audible in the audio version as well, narrated by yours truly. And I know you'll really enjoy it. So go out and get the book. And now back to the interview. You call Ultimus a faith-based firm. What does that actually mean on a Tuesday afternoon when a deadline is slipping and a client's upset? How does faith show up in those difficult moments, not just in a mission statement?
Well, I think it's a very nice segue from the previous conversation. I can't tell you how many emails I've written, deleted, rewritten, deleted, rewritten.
Yeah.
It's very easy, especially on Tuesday afternoon or even more so after hours, right? If I'm back at the computer and trying to catch up on emails and I'm already tired from a long day and an email comes out where a client is upset, right, wrong, or indifferent, or a deadline is slipping. It goes back to a lot of what I said before of getting the cards on the table. If we're open, we're transparent, we're not accusatory, being very factual in statements is always the best way to send an email, especially ones that are after hours or late, or we just need to make sure things are documented. And that's a lot of the rewrite I do. It's very easy to fire the snippy email or the text message and hide behind technology.
Right.
What I try to do is I try to position myself of, let's say I'm having a face-to-face conversation or a Teams meeting. How would I actually respond then? Would I fire off something snarky? Would I be sarcastic? No, I probably wouldn't. Generally, and that's why it's always nice to at least get on the phone, because at least if you have someone on the phone, you're generally going to think about what you're going to say, at least a little bit, and you're going to be more personal. Everyone has the ability to be mean behind an email or a text message. It's a lot harder to be mean or snarky or condescending or flippant over a phone or in person. So that's where the faith piece of it comes in. We are charged to be providers of light.
Right.
And if I'm being snarky and sarcastic just for the sake of being snarky and sarcastic, or I'm trying to stick it to you, that's not what we've been charged to do.
Yeah.
And it's not that I don't instantly have those thoughts. You can't control the instant thoughts that come into your head, but you can control what you do with those thoughts. You can control how you actually carry out your opinions of a situation. And that's a big piece of it for us, is that, when we do have those difficult conversations, being open and honest, not saying, well, I didn't get this from you, heaven forbid you gaslight someone. But yeah, we try to communicate upfront as much as possible. If we know that we're going to miss a deadline or think that we're going to miss a deadline, I would rather give someone bad news a week in advance than hope for the best. And then when it gets to the deadline, oh, well, actually, I need another couple days.
Yes.
Have the hard conversations early. And hey, look, it's a week in advance. I might miss this deadline. I'm going to do everything I can, but I might miss this deadline. We've had other projects have issues, right? We can only touch so many projects at once. Obviously, we keep our queue full, and that's why we do have some deadlines. And every project is important. There are some projects that have hotter deadlines because a client says, I got to have this in 2 weeks. Or, you know what? My deadline's flexible. If you need a couple extra days here and there, then that's great. And we love to have those conversations up front, because we know that if there's we've got a deadline coming up Tuesday, that if we don't get these drawings to permit, then this landlord is going to charge this owner late fees. Okay, that one we cannot miss. So
let me ask you
level
about
of importance. Yeah.
Let me ask you about openness and transparency. I was having a conversation with one of my clients a while ago, and they were complaining about one of their project managers who was being, in their perception, too open with the client. And the way that they framed it was like this. They said, we're making sausage here. And that wasn't a negative statement. It wasn't that they didn't want to deliver for the client what they were expecting, but sometimes it's not necessary for the client to know everything that goes into the production of the project. How do you balance some of that sausage making, so to speak, with the idea of transparency?
That's a really good question. I think it's client dependent. If it's an architect can be more open to some of the nuances and technical details of, well, here's why this project is delayed, because as we reviewed the code, we realized that a lab environment had to have this many CFM of exhaust. An owner doesn't care. Owner's like, look, I don't want to install new HVAC. What do I need to do to not install new HVAC? I don't care about what ASHRAE section 1018 says, whatever it is. Can you do it or can you not?
Right.
And so I think it is client dependent on how much information you provide. And then even within clients, certainly all personalities are different.
Yep.
One thing that we try to do a lot of is we try to actually put our engineers in direct communication with the clients.
Right.
We do have internal project management, but one thing that we have found a lot of value in is not shielding our engineers behind project managers. Is our engineers do a lot of the project management themselves. And so that way, if there is a question, there isn't anything lost in translation. We're not playing the telephone game where the owner asks a question, the PM maybe relays it not exactly the right way, the engineer answers, but then the PM doesn't relay it in the right way, where you get some of that other information where they may provide not enough or incorrect or too much information. Kind of cut out the middleman as much as you can. And that helps that communication a lot of getting the right information, because if an owner says, can I do this? The engineer says, yes, you can, or no, you can't. And one thing I impress upon our engineers is ask questions, right? I learned this a long time ago when I was just starting to date, right? Ask questions.
Sure.
And one question my wife and we ask each other a lot is, do you want comfort or do you want solutions?
Right.
If someone's coming at you with a problem, and this is involved more on the personal side, if there's an issue, whether it's a issue between us or an issue with one of her friends or something else in her world, at the end of the conversation, at the end of the first statement is we ask each other this a lot. It's like, look, do you want me to just listen? Do you want me to hear you? Do you want me to be your advocate? Or do you want me to talk through potential solutions with you? Right. Engineers, we love to give solutions. That's what we're born and bred to do. And I think a lot of that applies to the business world as well, of how technical do you want this answer?
Let me ask you a question about the structure of your business. It sounds like you marry the PM and the engineering role together at the moment. Is that correct?
We do a lot. So like I said, we do have some internal PM, and our operations is a little bit unique in that I have both the internal staff, but I also have a network of trusted professional engineer subcontractors, subconsultants.
Right.
As we get busy, those 1099 professional engineers will step in and provide support. So there's a little bit more PM with them, depending on their comfort and familiarity with our business and their interaction with our clients. But with our internal employees, yes, I lean very heavily on them to schedule and sit through design review meetings, to provide check sets, to ask questions, to get answers back to clients. A lot of that does fall on their shoulders.
As you're thinking of scaling your business, because this is one of the debates that even construction companies have, some construction companies, the estimator is going to run the work, right? But then they get to a certain point where the business grows to such a size that they begin to then divide those things out. But then some companies, they keep them together the whole way, even as the company gets bigger. What's your perspective on that in terms of as you grow your business? What's your perspective on the relationship between PM and engineer being married together or being separate?
The focus of what we do, our value prop, our differentiator, is that we put engineers in direct relationship or indirect client contact.
Right.
As we continue to grow, one of our biggest challenges operationally is how do we find engineers that are both well suited for that
Yes.
and excited for that extra opportunity?
Yes.
I could pick up the phone today and I could call any recruiter in Dallas and say, by Monday morning, I want 10 resumes on my desk of structural engineers with professional engineering licenses.
Yeah.
They could probably give me 20 or 100.
Yeah.
But the challenge is, where do we find these engineers, MEP, structural, aquatics? Where do we find these individuals that also have that PM ability, that almost business development mentality and conversation style? So that's going to be the challenge for us as we continue to grow. How do we still look for engineers that have the ability to serve those roles? I think there's value in that. And whether or not we're 6 employees or 60 employees, my vision as of now is to maintain that type of client relationship directly with our engineers.
Does that tie in with your made in the USA engineering philosophy in terms of, having someone who is capable of doing both of those things in the business as opposed to maybe offshoring the engineering and then onshoring the project management? Is that the idea there?
It certainly helps. The idea with the offshoring engineer resources to other countries to save some money, it can work. In my experience, it is cumbersome, it's tedious, and it takes a very, very, very long time to develop those relationships.
That's the ultimate work from home, huh?
It's the ultimate work from home.
Or remote work.
Remote work, right? And the most obvious level, the cultural differences are the easiest things to work through. But the timeline is honestly the hardest challenge. The idea of having somebody work while we're asleep is wonderful. If it worked exactly like that, if I could clone myself and I had myself to work at night on the other side of the world, that would be great. But the challenge is when those people go to bed, well, when it's their 2:00 in the morning and our 10:00 in the morning, they're not answering emails. So if there's something that is missed, incorrect, needs to be updated, clarified, well, you're not actually saving any time because then it's another day before they can get that answer back to you. And so if we don't have direct engagement or direct ability to oversee or pull information or get information out of those individuals, it can actually slow things down. So in a perfect world, if a business had maybe their own branch in another time zone that was able to work through the round-the-clock engineering work, I think that can be great. But the outsourcing of engineers to a separate third party, it's hard to find individuals who have the work experience. Working in the United States has just like every other country. I'm sure we don't work in Europe or Asia or South America. We don't do business there, but I'm sure that those countries have their own very specific ways that they do things, their own very specific construction preferences. So to have someone on the other side of the world, expect them to appreciate how we like to do concrete or we like to do framing. If they don't know that, teaching them how to do that and then also working through the timeline differences can just be a very significant challenge. And so even though on paperwork, it looks like you're paying 10 cents on the dollar per hour, but if instead of doing it in 10 hours, it takes 80, then what have you really saved?
Yeah.
And I think that comes back to the concept of hurry up and get to permitting or hurry up and do it faster. Everything in construction is better done yesterday. If a client says, I've got a hot project, I need this in less than 2 weeks. Wow, you got time on your hands. That I have not experienced that to go as well as having the local people. You can pick up the phone, you can talk to them during our business day. The client can always get a hold of them. I just find that worked more efficient.
You have a master's in mechanical engineering and an MBA. What gap did you see in your own capability that made you go get the business degree? And how has that changed the way you lead your business?
It was at my last employer when I had started off running the research and development group. And the transitions that were made were probably not going to keep me around very long. And someone in the sales organization, one of the vice presidents, saw that, maybe even before I did, and had reached out to me and said, "Hey, I want you to come work for me." And it was a transition from running research development to essentially, it was a title and position that they made up for me, was the director of product management. And I was essentially going to be the technical expert of the sales organization.
Interesting.
So no direct management or leadership over research development, quality control, operations, a lot of indirect leadership. But it was also positioning me to run a sales division and grow into higher level executive roles within that company.
Yeah.
I was sitting at the table with all of the vice presidents and the CEO and the COO and the CFO. And I was in a position where I was being involved in higher level business conversations that I couldn't quite appreciate. So being in that
Is that
role,
from just like a vocabulary perspective, not knowing what the
Sure.
words meant and the perspective behind them?
A lot of it was that. And a
Yeah.
lot of it was just my understanding of whether or not I understood the vocabulary, but appreciating the why and the how.
why,
And
okay.
like, why is having excess inventory expensive?
So did
But
the
it's-
MBA actually help you with all of that?
My emphasis on the MBA was on organizational leadership. And that was the big piece of it for me because I was a team of one. I was the director of product management. They didn't have a product manager prior,
Right.
but my role was responsible for the $3 billion product line. And we had 1,000 products. Well, being responsible for that product line, I had to figure out how to indirectly lead the research and development team. Even though they had their own new manager, I had to get them to respond to requests from clients. And I had to get quality control to make sure that research and development would create a product. Operations would figure out how to make it. And then quality control would have to figure out how to make sure that it was done right.
Right.
Well, my role as the product management leader, I had to make sure that all of that actually was executed.
Yeah.
And so understanding how different divisions within companies all worked, how to have a better appreciation of indirect leadership, and then also managing that product line, there's a lot to unpack there.
So how did your
responsibility.
MBA help you as you launched your own business and just got going as far as that was concerned? What was most useful to you in that?
It helped me understand how to run a business with cross-functional teams that I may not necessarily have a direct impression of or a direct appreciation for. How do they truly run their day-to-day, right? I'm not a marketing expert,
right?
But I can lead people in a way where we're all working towards a common goal.
Let me ask you this. How did that affect then you have three distinct service pillars in your business, right? You have MEP, you have structural, and aquatics. There's a lot of diversity right there. And so one of the keys to a business, people say, is, pick your niche, get really good at that. Did your MBA have any impact on your ability to have a diverse portfolio of clients in your current business in terms of managing those cross functions?
I think it does, because whether or not you're managing engineers or marketing experts or different kinds of engineers, yes, it is a little bit different managing MEP versus aquatics versus structural.
Yep.
Those disciplines are more integrated than it may seem at the face level. If you're designing the framing system and the ceiling system for a building structurally, you have to make sure that maybe your open web trusses are large enough for the ductwork to fit through. The plumbing systems, if you're looking at stacking restrooms, for example, those plumbing systems integrate very closely with structural. And so a lot of firms will focus on one or the other. And that's why we have these great technologies like Revit and clash detection and coordination items. Having that in-house just increases the efficiency, because my engineer can roll to the desk next to him and ask a question to the structural engineer. But the MBA, yes, I think that different mindsets, different engineers, different business units do have to be managed at least somewhat differently. So now, as a direct leader of those organizations, it's not indirect leadership. These individuals do report directly to me, but understanding how, if this structural engineer is working on a project for this client who has nothing to do with the MEP group, then there's different timelines and different expectations, and structural engineering does have different deliverables than MEP.
Think about the last time you promoted someone into a leadership role and it failed. Why did it fail? I can tell you one reason. People know how to build projects, but they don't know how to build and lead teams of people. Construction comes with its challenges that only insiders truly understand. Generic leadership training doesn't cut it. You need a program to train your leaders built specifically for construction professionals led by an industry expert. And my online course, The Shift, is exactly that course. It has 5 modules. It'll teach your people how to control their calendars and reduce stress and embrace chaos and accomplish their critical tasks. It will teach them the 3 essential messages they have to communicate every day in order to motivate and lead their team effectively. It'll show them how to build and lead a high-performing team, give them a framework for running effective meetings so they'll be able to solve problems in less than an hour, and also give them a higher perspective on their leadership that will enable them to work on the business and on their teams and not get stuck in the weeds micromanaging. So go out to my website, theshift.constructiongenius.com, read all about the course, and then enroll yourself and your leaders in the course, and I guarantee that it will transform your leadership. If it does not, you take the whole course and you didn't get benefit from it, you just send me an email, eric@constructiongenius.com, and I will cheerfully refund you 100% of your money. I'm really confident this course will transform your leadership. So again, go out to the website, theshift.constructiongenius.com, learn more about the course, and start taking it today. Let me ask you this. If you were the CEO of a construction company, and I realize that you're not, but if you were, or you were having coffee with the CEO, and the CEO was saying, I have a lot of strengths in my technical area. I know how to build a project successfully, but I want to get better at business. Would you recommend that they get an MBA?
I would recommend starting with maybe some ancillary classes on the areas that they felt most efficient in. An MBA is a very broad degree, and there's lots of specializations within that. You can do, again, the organizational leadership. You can get an MBA that focuses more heavily on accounting. To get an MBA just for the sake of getting an MBA as a CEO, I don't think is as important. I think the degrees and the certifications are very valuable for someone trying to climb the corporate ladder. It differentiates you. It gives you tangible evidence that, hey, here's a piece of paper that says I know things that may help separate you from other candidates. But as a CEO or lead an organization, getting an MBA just for the sake of having the piece of paper doesn't do you any good. You're already at the top. So your time is much better spent focusing on the areas that you have curiosities about. You can take online classes. A lot of colleges will allow you to go take classes just for the sake of it. You don't necessarily have to be in a degree program, because there are things that are required as part of that degree that may not be as relevant. As the CEO, to get an MBA, you'll probably have to take a statistics class. CEO probably doesn't have a need to take a statistics class. Yes. But what they have a need for is the higher level items. So no, I wouldn't necessarily recommend a formal degree to already a CEO or a high level executive.
But it sounds like it's interesting. One thing that you pointed out there is, let's say I am a CEO and I have someone in my organization where I've crafted or have a vision for them in terms of their career, a particular certification, or even a focused MBA in a particular area where they may need some strengthening, that could be useful. Did I hear that right?
It could be. Yeah. And I don't know. I think it's more useful to the individual, right?
Yes.
And it depends on their relationship with that executive. Again, as a CEO, if I have someone who is going to go get an MBA, I still understand what that MBA is going to mean. And if this is a business leader, and again, I go back to the statistics just because that was a difficult class for me.
No, it's
If for somebody who is maybe an accountant who wants to become a CFO, if they're going to go get an MBA for that, I think that's great. Kind of like what you asked me, right? What did it actually teach you? What are the major takeaways?
Yes.
It's like any book or any podcast, right? Not 100% of this information is going to be valuable or pertinent to everybody. Everyone's going to take their own nuggets from it. So again, somebody getting a degree or a certification just for the sake of having that isn't as valuable. Now, there are some, like a professional engineering license.
Sure,
that is a blanket certification and degree.
That's like table stakes. We're talking table stakes, not a bonus.
Yeah, that's right. So there are pros and cons, but I think the piece of paper that says MBA is more valuable to the individual because it validates them, what they've done. It provides framework and guidelines. Depending on your relationship with the higher ups, what the purpose is of getting that, there may be more or less inherent value in having that piece of paper. But certainly if you're looking to change your career or go into something else, then yes, that certification is absolutely a valuable differentiator.
Okay. You say that 70% of your clients give you repeat work and 25% comes from referrals. That means that you've built something a lot of firms never figure out, which is that loyalty. What's one thing you do differently in the first 30 days of a client relationship that sets that hook and lays the foundation for that repeat business?
It's the execution of what we say we're going to do. It's being communicative. It's building the relationship. It's answering questions. It's being responsive. I feel like it's at least every week, if not more frequently, that I get someone that says, hey, thank you for picking up the phone when I called you.
Yeah.
And that's all it is. It's picking up the phone. It's being accessible as an engineer because people don't expect their engineers to be accessible. So we say we're going to do it, and that sounds great, but do we actually execute it? And I think that there's evidence that we do because people keep coming back and they appreciate how we are accessible, how I pick up the phone, how our engineers pick up the phone. And if they can't get a hold of us, then they've got a phone number to the business development manager. And then if they get a hold of him, he can't answer their question, then he sends me a text message, hey, just to let you know, this is hot. You need to get back with this client. It's just setting the hook, and it can even be faster than that first 30 days, right? A lot of it is I take a very important focus on if we can turn around a quote in 24 hours, that puts us so far ahead of a lot of people. We've had orders. I've had someone call me at 10 o'clock. I have an order to them or a quote to them by 3 o'clock, and they have orders signed before the end of the day. They're like, look, you got back to me fast. Your pricing seems very fair. I'm not going to shop this. Let's do it.
So it's interesting because like what you're describing there has nothing to do with your technical ability. And it is so basic that people miss it so often. If we show up and do these basics of communication, keeping our word, picking up the phone, like you said, it immediately distinguishes you from other people.
It does. And it's proven that. And I didn't need an MBA to tell me that. Part of that is just inherent to who I am too. And I think that there are soft skills that we can all learn and develop. I wouldn't take an engineer who's done nothing but sit behind a cubicle for 30 years and try to make a business development manager out of them. I wouldn't do that. I'm a big proponent of let's improve strengths, let's mitigate weaknesses, but let's not try to fix weaknesses.
Yes.
But I think that at the end of the day, we can all agree that being human, being relational, smiling, doing the common courtesies that should be commonplace, you would think, as you mentioned, we don't all do it. We get stressed, we get aggravated, we have other things on our mind. And I'm not saying this because we're perfect. We're not. I'm absolutely not perfect. I say things that I wish I didn't. We have conversations, we have projects that go sideways, but a lot of really good relationships are formed through working through challenges.
Yes.
And let's say something goes sideways. Well, how do we fix it? Let's not just say, well, you know what? I'm going to pout about this. I'm an engineer. You didn't listen to me. I've got other clients. I don't have time for you.
Yep.
That's the easy thing to do. But sometimes saying, hey, yeah, I'm sorry. I'll own this. We'll make it up to you on the next one. We'll reduce our fee. We'll give you this feedback. We'll expedite another project for you at no cost. Whatever it may be, every situation is different. But no, you're exactly right. And just sometimes it's hard, but having that just extra moment to breathe, understand that there is another human on the other side of that line. I think that COVID was eye-opening for a lot of us when we weren't allowed to interact with people. We were stuck behind Zoom calls, phone calls. Maybe we ran out of work or some people couldn't interact with other people. I think that was eye-opening for a lot of people. I don't want to get so far removed from the heart of the pandemic that we forget what it was like to not be able to interact. I love in-person meetings. Anytime there's somebody, a new client, a project that is even remotely local, I don't want to do the Teams meeting. Hey, let's grab coffee. I'll drive to you. Let's grab lunch. Whatever. Let's really focus on the relational aspect of this because again, engineering is so easy to be a commoditized technical service. It's true. Well, I was going to say, no, anyway, I won't go down that route, but yeah, let me just
say this. I think what you're getting to, which is really important, is particularly in the, so to speak, the age of AI, where our computers are becoming so much more powerful, so to speak, the human interaction. And I really want to make that emphasis for the audience. If you're not getting face to face with your clients, belly to belly, or your potential clients, you're really missing an opportunity to distinguish yourself from other people who are just using technology in an efficient way, but taking that human element out of it, because it's the human element more and more that's going to distinguish companies as AI begins to be more and more emphasized in the way that we run our companies.
That's a really good point. I use AI a lot. I mentioned the late nights when I'm trying to figure out how to word an email.
Yeah.
I'll certainly use AI to figure out like, hey, here's my pain points. Here's my stresses. Here's everything that's going wrong. Help me articulate this in a way that is factual, calm, cool, and collected.
Yeah.
I think that's a wonderful use of
It
AI.
is. It's tremendous.
It's a very limited use of AI. AI is such a powerful tool. It shouldn't just be a search engine. It shouldn't just be an email rewriter, but it's a really great first start.
Yes.
However, unless you're doing that in a systemized, methodical way, it can be very easy to spot the AI generated email.
Yeah.
And I think that is a step, it's a big step in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
I would almost rather a genuine, heartfelt, hot-headed email response than something that is very obviously AI canned.
Yes.
Because it's like, at least I'm dealing with a real person. Now it's like, you aren't even giving me enough respect to tell me how it is, or you've got to have a computer generate this for you.
Yeah.
So just be careful with what AI is being used for and how much you're hiding behind it, because you can't always hide behind it. At some point, you're going to have a human face-to-face conversation. And if somebody meets you and you're an entirely different person than your AI emails, that's disingenuous. That's not true. And I think that loses a lot of credibility, again, faster than maybe being rude in an email, which you can always apologize for later. Gosh, sorry, it was 2:00 in the morning. My kid was sick all day. There's always good reasons for that. But I'm glad you brought that up, because AI is very important and we are trying to implement it in a lot of ways in our organization. But we've got to use it for the right things, and maintaining that human connection with people is so critical. It's going to be a differentiator as people lean more heavily on AI to do maybe some of the ancillary things, to do some of the admin type work, to do a lot of this data crunching. That's wonderful. But the people who lean too heavy on it to remove that human interaction, maybe they'll be really efficient, but as humans, when it's the robots interacting with each other, good luck, go for it. But as long as we are still ultimately humans making decisions, then we've got to have that human touch.
Yeah, it's interesting. One point I'd make from this is, if your client retention is not what you would hope for, and people are quietly quitting you, they're not necessarily sending you that email saying you guys suck. They're just not calling you the next time they have a project. Reflect not so much on your technical abilities, but reflect on whether or not that human interaction is taking place, because that's where the added value really lies, all things being equal from a technical perspective.
I think you're exactly right. And I think we see that in the workplace, and we forget that corresponds to our clients as well.
Yeah.
People generally don't quit companies, right? What do we say? They quit managers.
Yeah, they do.
And it's the same as your client. Your client is essentially your manager. They're the one that provides you work. They provide the paycheck.
Yep.
If you aren't being a good steward of them, then they're not going to come back. It's just like an employee leaving an organization because they don't like to be micromanaged, because they don't like the work that they're given. They don't like the work environment. Clients are the same way. So I think that's a really great analogy.
So as we wrap up here, let me ask you this. If you had to start your business all over again, knowing what you know now, what would you do differently?
It's a good question. I would have brought on a business consultant sooner. I brought on a business consultant probably 8 months to a year in.
Uh-huh.
I would have done that from day one.
What were they doing for you?
Teaching me how to start a business. Again, my leadership, the MBA, I felt pretty good about how to run an organization.
Yeah.
But the smaller items of all of the things that I didn't know. And one of the biggest things that was taught to me early on was, it doesn't matter what your company is about. The lifeblood of any organization is sales.
Yes.
And I thought when I was going to start a business, I'm a great engineer. I can engineer things.
Yep.
People are going to need me to engineer their things. And that is true to a degree that you have work. But if you don't have work, it doesn't matter how good of an engineer you are.
That's right.
If you don't have work, it doesn't matter how good of a contractor you are. If you don't have work, it doesn't matter how good of a doctor you are if no one shows up at your office.
Yep.
So again, if it's engineering or if it's chicken nuggets, if you aren't selling, if you're not getting out there, if you're not promoting your business, then your company's not going to last.
Yeah.
And that was a very eye-opening thing. And so I have been very, very focused on keeping the pipeline full.
Yes.
Let's figure out how to choke operations. If we can choke operations, that's an easier problem to fix.
Yeah.
Because if operations is beautiful and peachy and keen, but sales aren't coming in, you've got payroll problems because you don't have
Yeah.
anybody to pay those wonderfully efficient, open, no backlog employees through operations.
Yep.
I would rather pay more to bring in an outside contractor because, hey, gosh, I'm just completely slammed. I've got to pay this contractor to be able to sub this engineering project out and keep my client happy. I'm happy to take some margin points on that because I know that at the end of the day, we're still going to have a full backlog. So that would be the biggest thing is bring on, whether it's a true business consultant or just somebody else to help fill in the gaps of the things that an aspiring business owner doesn't know. If you're a chef and you want to start a restaurant, that's great. Again, you can probably cook all day, but can you manage the wait staff? Can you manage the back office? Can you work with the landlord on all of the things that come in with that, right? You can cook and you can have a great offering. Can you come up with a name of a business? That's catchy. What about a logo? What about a location? There's all these things that business owners don't generally step into a business because they just for the sake of running a business. Maybe again, if you're purchasing a franchise, that's different. But people that have a technical craft or have a purpose and they want to go sell something that they're good at, they don't know all of the other things. And so bringing on that expert early to help fill in those gaps, I think would help a lot of people be more successful in the early years.
Yeah, I think one thing you got to do is identify your weakness, right? Because some people, they start a business and they're great at sales, but they suck at operations. And so identifying where your weakness is, if you're a contractor, it's you got to get work, you got to build work, you got to get paid. Figure out where that weakness is and either hire to fill that gap or bring in, like you did, an outside consultant to help you to really focus in on where you need to improve. I really enjoyed this conversation, Daniel. Tell us a little bit more about your business and how people can get in touch with you.
Absolutely. Well, I think you've done a great job summarizing it over the course, but just to hit it again real quick, we are a Texas-based, open in 22 states currently across the nation, serving the construction market in MEP, aquatics, and structural engineering. For those listening who may not understand that, MEP is the design of your HVAC, electrical, and plumbing. Aquatics is the construction design of everything from koi ponds to water parks. And structural engineering is the foundation and framing members of buildings. We primarily serve architects and design build general contractors, but happy to make connections with anybody in the space because as relationally focused people, there's always a way to bring value to even folks within the trade. We've got a great website, ultimus.engineering, or more commonly, ultimusengineering.com. We're available or accessible on LinkedIn. We post, we comment, we like and share valuable content. And we're also available on most of the major social media platforms. But our email address and phone number is available on our website, and we would love to hear from you.
Awesome. All those links will be in the show notes. Daniel, I really appreciate you coming on the show today. Thanks for your time.
It's been a pleasure, Eric. Thanks so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for listening to my interview with Daniel. Here's a couple of things I want you to take away from this. First, when the phone rings, pick it up. Daniel said something that should bother you. He gets thanked every single week just for answering when a client calls. That's how low the bar is. And if you're not clearing it, someone else will. Second, if you're building a team, stop hiring for technical skills alone. Daniel's model depends on finding engineers who can also communicate, who can manage a client relationship, who do pick up the phone, have a real conversation, deal with issues face to face, and as quickly as possible. That's kind of rare, and it's worth paying for. And third, if you're thinking about starting a business, or if you already have a business and you see an issue in your organization that you can't fix, think about bringing in a business consultant to help you in that particular area. Make sure you identify the issue clearly, understand that you can't fix it internally, and then find some outside help, which leads me to recommend one thing to you. If you need some executive coaching, either for yourself or for a high performer in your organization that you know needs to go to the next level, then you should contact me because that's what I do all day. I work with high performers, helping them to get to the next level, particularly when it comes to making the shift from building projects to building teams of people. And that shift is essential to grasping and mastering if you're going to be successful in a leadership role. So reach out to me on my website, constructiongenius.com. Happy to have a conversation with you about that. Thank you for listening to today's episode, and share it with other people. Give us a rating or a review, wherever you get your podcasts. We'll catch you on the next one. Thank you for listening to this episode of Construction Genius. Hope you found that 1% of inspiration to help you in the next few days. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star review on iTunes. Share it with other construction leaders who you think would benefit. And always remember that the show is brought to you by Kick-Ass Meetings. I've been working with construction leaders since 2004, teaching them how to run extremely effective problem-solving meetings that gets their people collaborating, taps into their creativity. And to get yourself a free copy of the Kick-Ass Meeting Report, go to www.ericanderton.com/kickassmeetings. Grab yourself that free report, read it, use it in your business. You'll find it extremely useful. And thanks again for listening.